Coin traders, how we doing? What's going on? Thanks for joining me. Welcome to the show. Big sell-off again, but we are covering Celestia TIA on that ticker. Pretty interesting because as we do have extremely big sell-offs across the rest of crypto, TIA is one of the only ones that is positive on the daily. So that kind of does beg the question and kind of if this is a foreshadowing and highlighting of whether or not we're actually going to see a bottom come in for all of this major extreme sell-off, and whether this is the height of capitulation for crypto and altcoins, especially after given multiple double-digit day sell-offs in a row with extreme liquidation. Now, with all this, I actually made a tweet earlier talking about the bloodbath continuing, but the recovery is going to be really big. So we know that because most cryptos and altcoins have retraced about 50 to 60%, this does mean that the recovery is going to be big as well. So extreme fear right now, and that is why that, just like Warren Buffett says, be greedy when others are fearful. So a lot of fear right now, and obviously not as much as in a full-blown bear market, but since we have seen a lot of selling, this does create a lot of panic. So just know that bounces do happen when we do have big type of retracements like this, especially in bullish type markets. So this is just kind of what flushes out, and we see this time and time again on these type of moves. So this is just normal sell-off we do have to see, and these are perfect opportunities. Obviously not financial advice, but if you do want to buy the dip, a 50 to 60% retracement is typically what you want to see for a bottom, especially as we do approach some lower supports. But we're going to be talking about the chart today. But just a reminder, if you're not following me over here on Twitter or X, @coin_trades is the handle. Do look forward to chatting with everyone over there. Make sure to drop me a follow. See you over there. So back to this Celestia chart, and a lot of things to talk about. Like we said, we were down from the high down to the low where we actually bottomed out today. 64%, so extreme pullback, but that also goes after seeing extreme run up. So in just over 3 months, we saw Celestia hit about an 800% or a 9x gain from about where we actually saw the launch back at the start of November of 2023. Now, one thing I immediately want to jump into right now is the RSI Relative Strength Index, because this is a perfect example of what we actually see and talk about when we talk about bearish divergence. So the first move, extremely strong when we did top out at a price just above the $7 level. That's when we saw the peak amount of RSI coming in, when we actually did see an RSI hit 87.92. From there, made another higher high, but if we look at the RSI, especially after a third higher high, actually set a lower high compared to what we saw in the beginning, RSI for that 83.63. What happened next? We actually saw a next lower high, so a third point when we came in just below our current all-time high right now. So high, higher high, higher high, higher high, yet meanwhile we have lower highs on this RSI, continuous again. And this is when we actually set our all-time high. But if we look at RSI coming in at 65.56, so not even overbought above the 70 line here. And so essentially, we're just making this steady downtrend on this relative strength index. And so like we talk about, the more points of relevance that we have, the more the indication of that pullback. So since we do have 4 main points here of lower highs with higher highs in price, you can see how ultimately this did play out, and obviously such a sell-off, but that is proof that this indication of bearish divergence is actually extremely relevant, especially the more points that we have. Now, what this also means is that because this downtrend is continuing, especially now culminating with an oversold RSI in the strength of a longer-term bear market, this becomes a much more relevant indication of those oversold conditions, especially with such an oversold level of about 65% of that sell-off. So now with that, I actually do have to kind of look at the stochastic RSI as well, because do have relevance here, because every high that we have, you can see pulled back, but once we actually did have our bullish cross, did have a little bit more momentum. So even on this retracement here, still getting a rally here, and let's actually figure out percentage gain. We saw rallies and gains of about 30%. On the next one, we actually saw a rally and gain here of probably, 32%. So even now on this current stochastic flip, from there, potentially rallying up to the next level high, could be. And obviously the next level of support slash resistance now would be about a 50% gain up to about the 1163 level. But so on the bullish moves here, if we actually look at gains from the low stochastic RSI on the cross, 100% gain here to the close, about 89. The next one we were looking from 1160 up to the highs, about a 50% gain. Next one from about the $15 psychological to the current all-time high right now, about a 40% gain as well. So you can see that that's definitely within the realm of possibility for this upside move. And if we do want to talk about this big resistance point, we're looking at a big resistance point that was previous support multiple times right at 1170. So obviously recently found it as support on this bounce before rejecting from these EMAs. And then obviously looking left on this kind of arc type, inverse cup and handle type move. Big point of strong support before the rally up to the over $20 level here. So strong move to the upside, strong pullback, especially on increased bearish divergence on the RSI. We had oversold conditions and bullish crosses and momentum here. So now we are looking for that oversold bounce. So if we do get above this 1170 target, then we actually would expect that to flip into support once again before seeing the next leg to the upside. But we know that this is going to be a strong temp, so we are going to see probable rejection, especially after we do see a 50% rally from this bottom. So unless the crypto space itself just goes ham, I wouldn't actually expect to see big rally and a complete inverse without a lot of increased bullish volume here. But the catalyst for that driving event is going to be a lot of bullish change across crypto right now, because it's not likely, unless we see some type of black swan event specifically for Celestia, that we're going to see Celestia act as an independent name and rally a bunch while the rest of the crypto space continues to pull back. However, one of the things about this pullback is that we are starting to get an inverse parabolic move, which does mean it's not sustainable to the downside, especially when we do talk about an oversold trend. So an oversold trend now with an inverse parabolic move does give a little bit more indication and highlight that likely we are going to see some type of upside pressure here coming in soon. So once again, that does give highlight to a lot of the resistance points that we're looking at, and does make them a lot more relevant of a target to the upside. Now, I do want to flip over to the weekly, because we do have this candle closing tomorrow in about 24 hours from now, actually. So one of the things significant is just all of this bullish volume here, but obviously you can see it tapering off in that, which is one of the things that led to that bearish divergence in the RSI. But with this sell-off, especially given that it's been about 2 months of continuous sell-off, we haven't necessarily seen that much volume come in. So a lot of the hype here was due to a lot of the initial airdrops for Celestia, but because we haven't necessarily seen continued action in that, that is why we have started to see this taper off and this all-time high come in, especially when we have had bullish buying volume start to subside here. But like we talked about, selling pressure hasn't necessarily been that great, especially across this 2 months. So we are essentially due for a volume to come in, but that's not necessarily going to be bearish volume. So if we actually look at a Fibonacci retracement from the launch to the all-time high right now, and we examine this pullback, we're actually looking very nice right now, sitting at the 61.8%, which is at 951. So big shadow below this candle that did dip down to the low right now of 760. But obviously you can see that on the current daily, with a lot of this buying pressure, we are starting to hopefully maintain this close when the candle closes tomorrow in 24 hours. We typically talk about the zone between 61.8 and 78.6 being one of the farthest downside targets that we can essentially look at in order to maintain an uptrend. But when we do get to this type of target, that pretty much starts to give a little bit more likelihood to a little bit of longer term price action that's sitting sideways or even goes into consolidation. Because when sell-offs do occur this great, it's not necessarily likely that we see an immediate bounce and a return to a new all-time high. Now, if the price did end up holding support at, say, the 38.2, then that's a lot more likely of an indication that we could see a return to a new all-time high and this longer-term trend continuing. But because right now we have seen such an extreme sell-off without a lot of support and buying pressure, it is going to take a lot more time now to actually see a return to that all-time high in most instances anyway. So flipping over into the 2-day chart, do like the 2-day chart a lot, and especially right now since there's a lot of relevant indications that we need to point out. So one of the things, extremely nice long lower shadow, but that doesn't necessarily mean we are going to see the next leg of upside right now. So we do have a very nice volume bar, especially without a lot of volume coming in. So a pretty strong bearish sell-off. Obviously, big dump day over the last 2 days for crypto, so that definitely makes sense. One thing about current setup right now is that because Celestia is so new, there's not actually a lot of previous trade history for previous levels of support and resistance. So there's not too many to look at. Right now, I have a little bit of a zone based on previous price trading history for about 8.25, all the way up to about the $10 psychological level. So turning on the VPVR, for example, that's a very big, good range right now that we're trying to find and actually sit on top of. Peak volume for a mass right now at about 970. And so if we actually see continuation below that, then we're pretty much going to fall down to about the 850 level, and then a free fall from there would occur down to about 7. And as you can see, that's kind of the point where we did find the low of this long lower shadow here, and a little bit below that down to about 7.25. So looking all the way left, big point of resistance on the initial move before pulling back and finding support above the 12-period EMA on this 2-day chart. So hopefully those two levels can be the sign of what we're actually going to find support as, because below that actually would be all the way down to about the initial prices coming off of the launch, down to about 100% retracement. So don't think necessarily we're going to get that. And again, let's pull up the Fibonacci and figure out exact levels for that as well. So the 61.8 at 649 right now, down to the 786 at 6.322. So a little bit lower, we do find our support on top of that. So again, that is a very good reason why we have seen wicking down and this lower shadow down to that level. So very good points of support, especially given the retracement amount, the Fibonacci retracement levels, and also the previous trade histories as well. So if we can get a little bit more upside and volume continuation, that's going to be a good sign. But right now, we are looking at extremely strong confirmation of these exponential moving averages being that good relevant support and resistance, specifically right now resistance. So on the way up, big points of resistance and actually holding this whole zone in between the 12 and 26. Obviously, the 12 period was an extremely nice guide for the trend, holding path of least resistance. But once this candle did break it, and we did see the 12 get really tight with the 26, had that bearish cross, and then that's been our extremely good bearish signal for the downside here. So about to get the cross for the 26 and the 50 right now before finally having our fully bearish scenario and setup. So the quicker we can actually reclaim support on top of these exponential moving averages, the better the chart's going to be set up for a continued upside action. Otherwise, that is going to be confirmation of a longer term retracement. So yeah, hopefully the current oversold signals right now do end up playing out, especially as we do sit on top of these lot of supports, and also we do see this inverse parabolic formation setting up. So yeah, personally, I think Celestia is going to be an extremely strong name. Obviously not financial advice too. Making a entry right now would lead up to the previous all-time high over 100% gain. So that's kind of why we actually do like these pullbacks, because a 50% retracement does lead to a 100% gain here, or a 2x of your position. But yeah, like we mentioned, do think that Celestia is going to be an extremely strong name, especially with the L1 blockchain space. And a lot of the big retracement was just due to a lot of the initial success and extreme hype that we have seen for Celestia coming in since its launch, which was only about 3 months for this nice upside move. So huge upside move for a very nice run, obviously leads to big retracement and sell-off. But ultimately, we are expecting this longer-term run to continue and for Celestia to be a very good performer for this upcoming bull cycle, especially since it is a nice new shiny name. So yeah, with that actually is going to go ahead and wrap up the show on Celestia TIA on that ticker. Hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. Also, make sure to drop me a note in the comment sections below if you do have any questions, comments, issues, disagreements, all that stuff. Don't forget to drop me a follow over on Twitter at @coin_trades is the handle over there, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. But otherwise, that is going to go ahead and wrap it up. Appreciate all the continued love and support. As always, it does mean so much. Stay safe, take care, and I'll catch you back in the next video.